Koshiencast, the world's best and only sports anime fan podcast. My name is Matt, and joining me today is a special guest, Matt.
Hey there.
Hi, Matt. How's it going?
It's going okay. It was I think an improved week overall, and I'm ready to dive right in.
Okay, cool beans. Well, as you may know, we are covering week 7 of the fall season that covers November 13th to the 19th. Just a quick announcement. Of course, we will not be covering Tiger Mask this week because it did not show up.
Yeah, it was interesting. We were looking for it up until yesterday, when I Googled what was going on with episode 8 of Tiger Mask, and I got redirected to the official Twitter, where they posted an image of Miss X seeing that GWM had shut down the transmission or something to cover in their tracks the fact that they weren't going to air it, but episode 8 will apparently air next week. Um, on one level, it's okay because they started early, so they're on episode 8 while most of these shows are on episode 7. So I don't know if that'll make it okay or not, but the animation quality has been going downhill recently, so it doesn't exactly speak highly of their production.
Yeah. So hopefully it'll mean good things, but as we already kind of know, doesn't generally.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when we've seen Long Riders take a break, it didn't mean that the episode they came back with was any better, after the fact. And we'll
Right.
get into that for their second missed episode this week. Um, the only exception I can think to that is Days, which had a week off between its 12th episode and 13th, which started this core. Um, but that was a planned break, so there was a
Right. Well,
big.
because that was just a seasonal thing.
Exactly. Yeah. So they had a big jump in quality for episode 13, but that was planned. It wasn't like there was something going fundamentally wrong with their production, like we assume is what's happening with Tiger Mask, and certainly is what's happening with Long Riders.
Yeah. All right. So anyway, do you want to jump into something we actually want to talk about?
Oh, yes. So we'll start off with Yuri on Ice. So Yuri on Ice episode 7, it pretty much just covers the free skate portion of the program. Um, which is the second round in the Cup of China. And so after the short program, after the first round, Yuri is actually in the lead, and that hits him pretty hard that night, and he can't really sleep because he's so stressed about the pressure of being on top and worried that he won't be able to win and live up to everybody's expectations. So he's unable to sleep, and Victor spends the next day trying to get him to calm down. Victor tells him to take a nap and then lies down on top of him. Victor falls asleep, but Yuri doesn't. He tries all sorts of things to try to get him to relax, but it doesn't really seem to work. Meanwhile, the routines begin. So since Yuri placed first, he's actually going to skate last in the free program. So they go in reverse order by score. So Guanhong, the Chinese skater, goes first. Um, he ends up actually doing pretty well, and Yuri is watching it on the TVs, and he freaks out because he sees how well Guanhong is doing. He turns off all the TVs in the public area, um, and he has to sort of run away. Meanwhile, Yuri tries to get away, and it segues into Christoph, the Swiss skater, who had placed fifth, doing his routine. He's fired up. He's doing better than anyone expects him to do. And Yuri completely panics. And there are cameras on Yuri while he's panicking in public. So Victor takes him down to the car park in order to just isolate him and get him somewhere where he can calm down. Um, while Chris is skating, he remembers how Victor challenged him to meet him in Worlds 10 years before. And Chris says that he wants to make sure that Yuri doesn't win and take Victor's place because Chris thinks that he's the only one who has a right to take Victor's place, basically. Um, Pitchett then is skating next. He is worried that Yuri and Chris are both able to jump higher than him, so he focuses on execution. He ends up having a really good skate, and he pulls into first. So Yuri is still down in the car park, but he can hear the crowd going crazy above him for Pitch It, and that just freaks him out more. Victor has to put his hands over Yuri's ears to try to get him to calm down. Then it's Leo's turn, and while Leo is skating, Victor tries to break Yuri's nerves, basically just get him to crack emotionally, and he does this by saying that if Yuri doesn't get in the top 3, that Victor will take responsibility for it and resign, which does break Yuri, and he begins to cry and say that he doesn't want his failures to reflect on Victor. All he wants is for Victor to support him no matter what. And so they have to start heading back upstairs, even though Yuri is broken down, but Victor's glad that he was able to actually get a reaction, so he's not just pacing nervously. Georgie is next to compete right before Yuri, and his theme is basically trying to act out as if he's a prince rescuing his princess and trying to convince his ex-girlfriend to come back to him. His ex-girlfriend is in the audience, and she watches, and she basically calls him a loser while he's performing and makes him fall, and he's not able to place. So finally, Yuri actually gets to the rink, and he gets on the ice, and he actually pokes Victor on the head and tries to get Victor to calm down, which is interesting, since Victor had just been doing the same for him. He basically, his goal while he's skating is to impress Victor. So he wants to do something that Victor doesn't expect and exceed Victor's imagination for what Yuri is capable of. He ends up doing at the very end of his routine. He does a quad flip. He isn't able to land it cleanly, but he does get all the rotations in, which is a feat that Victor himself was never able to perform in competition. Yuri looks at Victor over on the side and says, "I did great, right?" And then Victor jumps on him and kisses him, and they land on the ice, and everyone around there is surprised, and that basically ends the episode. So, long summary, but there was a lot of meat in this one.
Yeah, there's a lot of meat to this episode, and I just want to address the elephant in the room here.
Yeah.
Which is the fact that there is a sequel to The Skater and the King.
Wait, oh, you mean Pitchett's music?
Pitchett's song was from The Skater and the King 2.
Oh, so they had to make up a sequel to a made-up musical in order to give him music?
To give him more music, yes.
That's awesome. I love that that's the elephant in the room. Well, do you want to start off with the thing that everyone's talking about with this episode?
Okay, so yeah, there's Victor's did he kiss Yuri or not, which is something I am seeing a lot of debate about.
Yeah.
Because...
Well, can you just explain what the shots look like?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I did take note of that. So basically, Victor's lips are very defined during these shots. We get a couple of extreme close-ups. So they're very clearly trying to draw your attention to the lips. And then they dive at an angle that, they shoot the camera from an angle in which you can't you see Victor's face in front of Yuri's, and then there's a pause. Everybody is quiet, and then as they're on the ground, Victor, you do see that their heads are apart after they fall down.
Right.
They're not on top of one another. So there's your plausible deniability as to whether or not they kissed.
Right, but with context, you'd have to you'd have to want them to be doing anything else. And there's a couple. So the visual cues tell you that they have a visual cue on Victor's lips, a visual cue on Yuri's lips, and then them colliding into each other at the face, effectively, right. Even though Victor's arm covers their mouths. And there's sort of like a couple textual cues here too, because earlier in the episode, when Yuri is freaking out, Victor says, "So what? Do you want me to kiss you? Will that calm you down?" Right. And Yuri's like, and he's just like, "No, I just want you to support me." But the fact that he said, "Do you want me to kiss you?" didn't actually faze him. It didn't freak him out.
Right.
And then the second one is that after they have their alleged but definitely kiss, um, they're looking at each other, and Victor says, I don't have the notes precisely, but he basically says it was the only thing he could do to surprise Yuri more than Yuri had already surprised him with the quad
Right.
flip, which is a callback, like that. So to me, it's not deniable, unless you desperately don't want to acknowledge the possibility that these characters are gay for whatever
Yeah.
reason. I mean, it's a figure
Right.
skating anime. Like, why are you trying to defend yourself? But anyway.
Well, I mean, not only that, but I mean, this episode also features Victor sleeping on top of Yuri, like basically snuggled up on his chest.
Right.
I mean, like these are not just two bros who are just just two dudes that are just broing out and just need to share a bed with one another.
Right, exactly.
Like, I mean, the only way you can basically even deny it at this point is that the series has not actively said yes, these two are a couple.
Yeah.
Like that's literally the only thing you can do at this
Yeah,
point.
and so since about episode 2, we've been saying they're supposed to be gay. They are,
Right.
whether or not you can say they're in a relationship, like that's what it's trying to imply, and you have to
Right.
work to argue
There's
yourself out
more.
of it.
Yes, there's more work you have to do to deny it at this
Uh huh.
point.
Yeah.
Kind of moving away from that, there were some other really interesting things about this episode that I wanted to point
Yeah.
out.
Please.
I really like the way that they establish the dramatic tension about Victor or Yuri's like basically freak out.
Mm.
Like especially when they're down in the parking lot and Pitchett's basically doing very well because it's generally focused on Pitchett doing this routine and the announcer's just basically freaking out.
Yeah.
Like they're just constantly like, oh my god, Pitchett's making history right
Yeah.
now.
Exactly.
He's doing like better than anybody else, and then they just keep having these very quick cuts back down to the parking lot and watching Yuri freak out.
Well, yeah.
Basically, just
I was just going to say that
ba-
you can see Yuri, he's freaking out, but the same crowd you hear cheering in the earlier shots with Pitchett, you then hear a muffled cheer while Yuri's listening to it.
Right. And I like this constant, like, it's just like these quick reminders of like, okay, yes, Pitchett's doing very well. This is a big hype moment. But remember what this means for our main character.
Right.
And I thought that was a really neat way because without ever actually having to draw attention to it. Because I feel like a lot of other sports series, they have to have this narration. Like Victor would probably have this mental narration of like, oh no, this isn't good for him because this is going to break down his mentality because Pitch is doing really well and he has all these expectations to listen to. No, it trusts us to understand that that's the issue.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
So it's like, it's one of the complaints we have had about it is the fact that they don't really explain they don't go over in depth with explanation of how ice skating really works.
Or how it's scored, yeah.
Or how it's scored at all. But at the same time, its refusal to explain that much to us is also kind of one of its biggest strengths.
What do you mean?
Well, just basically assuming that we will understand at the very least context cues.
Oh, yeah, totally.
And I thought that was very well done.
Yeah, because you don't need to know what's going to necessarily yield a big the stuff that's important for you to know, they give you what you need. Like when Yuri does the quadruple flip at the end,
Yeah.
which I don't necessarily know how to differentiate that from some of the other jumps they do. But they gave you enough context to say this is something that Victor himself never did in this way, and Yuri just did it. That's all I need to know.
Right, I mean, it really could have been a move. It doesn't really matter. The important part is that Victor wasn't able to do it, and now Yuri is attempting to basically take over his reign.
Right.
The other thing I really liked is that we've always had these implications that Yuri, like, succumbs to pressure pretty easily.
Mm-hmm.
But it's always been sort of in the background, like, we kind of come in on Yuri kind of getting over that, like over one of his big panic attacks. And it's always just been referenced. So I really appreciated actually having an episode where we actually watch the consequences of that.
Yeah.
Rather than just having this like, oh, okay, well, he used to like succumb to pressure, but he's generally over that now with Victor's help. No, this is still something he has to work through, and something we have to, it's a big weakness of his.
Yep. Yeah, I agree, and I thought it was interesting that he realized that he's always cried after skating, because
Right.
after he failed to do well enough. But this is the first time he cried before, and he was able to actually let the pressure go instead of just having it build and build and build and affect his performance. He was able to have that pressure get broken, with Victor's help.
Right. And that's kind of the important part about their relationship is the fact that these two actually work very well for one another because Yuri kind of needs somebody to kind of bring him down.
Yeah.
Uh, he needs kind of somebody to like basically give him a boost. He needs somebody who's gonna let him express himself. Whereas Victor kind of needs somebody. Whereas Victor, on the other hand, like, because there was that point where he was like, he wasn't really thinking about Yuri's feelings or about how he would actually react to it. He was just trying to elicit a reaction from him.
Right.
Like, and I think Yuri's freak out there was kind of good for Victor too, because he's like, okay, so yeah, I did break him. I did get what I wanted here, but I kind of stepped on a minefield here.
Yeah, exactly. He didn't really know how to react. He says that effectively when Yuri starts crying. He's like, I don't really know how to deal with people crying in front of me. It's like,
Right.
you did this on purpose.
Yeah, he's like, he lives such a carefree life and basically doesn't like really give the impression that he cares that much about the people around him because he
Yeah.
just kind of does what he wants. And now, like, having a situation where he's forced to confront that.
Right.
It's like, oh, geez, this is actually somebody I care about, and this is what happens.
Right.
So yeah, it was a really good episode this week. I really enjoyed this episode.
The one thing I'll say is that I hope the next episode doesn't jump straight into the Moscow Cup or the whatever the Russian competition is, because these last two episodes have felt very similar. It's just been going through routines and watching Yuri react to them through it.
That is true.
And I would like to see a different structure where it's not just 6 routines in a row.
Right. Well, because we've had our big tournaments now, and I feel it is kind of time now for a bit of cool down because like most sports anime have that.
Mm-hmm.
Because they you have your big tournament, you have your big game, and then but you have so much tension building up here. You got to give a little bit of time for character development. Kind of let the characters reflect on what's happened.
Right. Yeah. Hopefully. Anyway, but yeah, overall it was good. One of the I don't know. I think it was more interesting than the last couple episodes.
I
Obviously,
agree.
it's important to see their relationship advance towards undeniability. But yeah, so you want to move on to our next show that also turned things around a little bit?
Oh yeah. Go on to Haikyuu, man.
Exactly. So we're jumping in with episode 7 of Haikyu, and one thing I want to note before we dive into the summary itself is the title of the episode. The title is Obsession. I thought that was interesting and maybe a theme we'll come back to in our discussion.
Right.
So the episode starts off with the 5th set, and Coach Ukai has decided just to pull Kageyama because Kageyama was tired at the end of the last set. He was starting to make mistakes, and he had Sugawara sub in. The issue, of course, is that Sugawara hasn't started a set in a long time because Kageyama's been the primary setter. He is extremely nervous, and he feels like his hands are cold. Their manager, Kyoko, comes over and holds his hands, and Sugawara responds, "I can't marry you yet," which I thought was pretty funny in the moment. And then, of course, all of the other members of the team get immensely jealous that Kyoko would be paying attention to him and holding his hands, and it's honestly a funny scene. Anyway, so moving forward, Sugawara has a flashback to his training in doing spikes. So as soon as he is given the opportunity, he actually allows Nishinoya to do a jumping set, and then they do a 5-man charge with the rest of the players, and Sugawara gets a spike despite being the setter, and he scores one of the first points. So that sort of sets the tones for the fifth set, is that Sugawara is not to be underestimated, right? Switching over to the Shiratorizawa side, the focus on this episode really is flashbacks from Tendo and Ushiwaka. So Tendo remembers how even when he's in high school, a lot of the other members of the team are scared of him and intimidated by him, but the Shiratorizawa coach doesn't mind, and he says that as long as he can score, he doesn't care what other people think, right? So then he cuts to sitting in the dining hall, and he's sitting down and talking to Ushiwaka about how Ushiwaka started volleyball. And we get a flashback within a flashback, and Ushiwaka starts remembering that he learned volleyball from his father, and his father refused to let anyone teach him to use his right hand. They said basically that Ushiwaka using his left hand was what made him special, and that he would need to be special in the future. His father was someone who had played volleyball in high school and college, and he wanted to be on a team just like his father had been and be an ace because of the way that his father talked about his team's ace. So it goes through a couple other elements with the flashback, and Ushiwaka's dad told him that he needs to find a strong team so that he can see lots of interesting players. And then we cut back to the present, and the competition and the back and forth in the fifth set has finally inspired Ushiwaka, and he realizes that he's having fun and that he's really engaged with a match in a way that he usually isn't. He looks around back at his teammates, and he smiles at them, which is something we've never seen before, and he says, "I'm starting to get into it." Of course, all his teammates freak out because that's the kind of enthusiasm he never displays. Despite that, he hits into a block from Suki, but the point still scores even though Suki gets a one touch. But when they come down, Suki realizes that the spike cut his hand. So Suki's hand is bleeding, and he has to get taken to the infirmary. He's getting walked off with Kyoko, and he jokes to his brother about how nice it'll be to relax for a while, but actually his face, he's just trying to hold back tears and put up a front. The episode ends with a flash to Tendo again, remembering how when he was a little kid, the other kids playing volleyball said that monsters aren't allowed on human teams. But then he remembers playing volleyball anyway and shutting down those same kids with his blocks, and he sort of relishes the opportunity to break people's spirits like he does to block the spike from Sugawara at the end of the episode.
Right. Okay, so my takeaway from the episode is that this is really when Karasuno is breaking down. We have Kageyama on the bench because he's so exhausted because he's played 4 sets. You have Suki who's basically been their MVP this entire game. Who's has to be taken off the field because his hand is basically bleeding and in terrible pain. And I feel like at the end of this episode, it's implying that Suga's gonna break as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because basically Tendo just completely broke the fact that, this new confidence that Suga had just gained in himself with his spikes.
Yep.
And so this is going to be the time, well, first of all, for me to eat crow. Heh.
Come on.
Matt, they're the crows, I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay. Move on.
But, so a couple things that we kind of have to. First of all, I was completely wrong that this match was going to basically be Shiratorizawa basically dominating this entire game. They're actually pretty, up until the very end.
Yeah.
They're actually pretty even throughout this. It's not until the end that Shiratorizawa is starting to dominate this.
Yeah.
In fact, they did a pretty good job at the beginning of this match, basically setting it up so it seemed like Karasuno was going to take a pretty early lead,
Mm-hmm.
which I really appreciated because I was really expecting this to basically be Shiratorizawa, like basically racking up like about 10 points at first while Karasuno's still at like 0, and then for them to pull away like a miraculous comeback.
Yeah, it is a standard narrative, but I'm glad they didn't do it.
Yeah, exactly. Again, this is part of the benefit of the author of the series actually playing the volleyball
Yeah.
himself and kind of understanding how the rhythm of some of these matches actually go.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, Now, there was one thing I know you wanted to talk about, which was so my takeaway from this episode was that Ushiwaka basically getting into the game is a double-edged sword.
Hmm.
Because in the sense that, he's hitting a lot harder now, but he's also making more mistakes.
Well, it's unclear whether I don't know if that was the implication you're supposed to get, because what mistakes do you think he made?
Well, because when he was serving, it was getting really close to the line, to the point where it's starting to be vague that that whether or not it's out. So it seems like to me that if he keeps getting into this more and more, he's gonna start shooting. Gonna start knocking it out unintentionally, which is not something mistakes are not something that Ushiwaka does.
Yeah. Um.
Um.
Well, the one thing that I wanted to talk about with Ushiwaka that I thought was interesting, and we'll circle back to what you're saying, is just that we get to see something from his perspective. So
Right.
what's interesting to me is that this feels like the first episode where Ushiwaka is a character and not a just a force of nature, which is
That
effectively
was
what
the
he was.
exact term I was thinking
Yeah.
of.
So up until now, he's just sort of been the perfect volleyball player who had no real faults, but also had no emotions, and he was just infinitely large, infinitely skillful, effectively unstoppable. Um, and even if you managed to stop him on one play, he would figure it out and overcome you because he's just the best there is. So it was interesting to see where that drive came from. A lot of his emotionlessness is just his personality. Like even as a kid, he's always been that way. He's been really reserved, but despite that, he saw the team as a way of connecting with people who were doing something great. He wanted to meet great volleyball players. He wanted to be able to live up to his dad's example and do something his dad would be proud to see him doing. Um, and also, in the end, he realized that once he finally had a match, like he has with Karasuno, where he's playing against a team that he's not sure he can beat, he's able to really enjoy himself for the first time.
Right.
I don't know if it was implied that he was making mistakes so much as he was just operating on the fringes. Like the interpretation I got is that he respects Karasuno so much in a way that he doesn't usually respect other teams that he was forced to operate in a riskier pattern, right?
Okay.
So like he's making serves that are right on the line because he has to in order to succeed, or um, his spikes are getting blocked but barely, and he's hitting it so it can barely get blocked, or he changes his play style. Like there's one shot where Nishinoya has effectively learned Ushiwaka's habits, and he's in the place to receive a straight spike, but at the last minute Ushiwaka is able to adjust and spike to the left where
Okay.
nobody is. So he's forced to adjust his play style because he respects Karasuno. At least that's what I got on the surface level.
Okay, no, that's an interesting way because the way I had taken it was that because he was getting into the game, like he was kind of losing control of himself. This big emotionless,
Yeah.
like basically volleyball machine was kind of finally starting to come off the hinges because he's getting like excited about it now. He's finally showing emotion. So was this going to be his big moment where he's going to start like making failures?
Yeah. So
But I think that's a more interesting interpretation of it, actually, like what you're saying.
yeah, the only I'm not gonna take too much time, but the one thing I want to say on that is that I don't think, knowing the rest of this series, that they would ever make an argument against having fun playing volleyball.
That's a fair point.
You know, like I just can't imagine that the conclusion would be like, if only he'd been more emotionless and not, taken this to heart, then he could have won. You know.
Right. I guess that's fair. I suppose that is pretty
Do you
fair.
wanna do you wanna discuss Tendo and his little backstory and his moment at the end?
Oh yeah, no, he's creepy.
Yeah.
Well, because it's really fun to see how Tendo basically being this like really fun character. There's it's hard to describe what makes this really creepy.
Hmm.
Like I guess it's the fact because we get these shots of him thinking like these very quiet shots of him thinking back to his childhood and like you clearly see him as a child and he thinks like break them.
Yeah, exactly.
Like all he wants it's like that's kind of the first setup. It's like okay, Tendo is going a little unhinged now.
Yeah, you can see that sort of the goofiness is a little surface level, but deep down there's a lot of anger and resentment.
Right.
Because you see this first with him as a high school player that even his own teammates are freaked out by him, and he can hear that and he notices. He just chooses not to acknowledge it publicly. But this has gone back to when he was a little kid. From when he was a little kid, he was rejected for being creepy and weird. But he
Right.
took that rejection and he played anyway, and he just tried to break the spirits of anyone who came up against him as a kind
Right.
of revenge.
Because yeah, and I guess that's the thing because now we're in the realization. It's like this guy isn't here to have like this guy's sense of fun and what we've taken his sense of fun are two very different things. And I guess it's that realization that's really creepy.
Yeah, I agree. You just see him as like, oh, he's the wacky, creepy character. It's like, no, actually, he's the emotionally damaged character.
Right. He because like it's because I kind of expected Ushiwaka to be the one who's damaged. Like my interpretation of what I was expecting his backstory to be would be like he came from like this father or like where he's constantly demanded perfection.
Yeah,
And it's
exactly.
like no, Ushiwaka is actually the emotionally stable one. He's actually got a pretty decent life
Yeah.
with a very supportive father.
Yeah, and it's funny because his father very clearly goes against that. Because again, you would assume the same thing. If he's the best in the sport, you assume that his father's pressuring him. But they show shots of his father saying like, I enjoy volleyball. I hope you enjoy it too. I would like to have this be something we share, but if you don't like it, I don't expect you to play. And he actually says
Right.
that's his first memory is being told, like, I just want to enjoy this with you if you're interested, but if not, that's fine because I love you, son. Like,
Right.
this is the
Right. It's like
most
oh.
well balanced kind father. And it's not like he disappeared or died or anything. It's just like they're like, "Oh, well, where's your father?" He's like, "Oh, he's overseas on business, but he should come back for another match later if we get to nationals."
Right. Yeah. Exactly. He's clearly making time for his son
Yeah,
here.
exactly.
So that's kind of the interesting twist that Tendo's actually the one who's the real menacing figure on that
Mhm.
team.
Yeah, and that's very unexpected.
Real quick before we go on, I know we're kind of going long on this segment, but there's one thing I did want to ask you about. What was your interpretation of the line of Suga going, "I can't marry you yet, Kyoko"?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that might. My guess is it's something about the way they posed. Like the way that he
Right.
had his hands and she put her hands around his would be a clue to a Japanese audience that it's sort of reflective of a pose in a wedding. Um,
Okay.
that was my guess, but again, I don't actually know enough about
It was
Japanese
kind of a
wedding
weird
ceremonies.
line,
Yeah.
just on the basis it's like, so are they implying that they're actually going out? Or is Suga just being a dumb kid and being like, I can't marry you yet, Kyoko, I'm too young.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I have to assume that it was like a visual cue for
That's
a joke in
fair.
Japan, but again, I don't have a great answer. Despite that
Yeah.
fact, it was funny. Like the visual
Oh,
cue
yeah,
was funny, so it
absolutely.
was it was a highlight for me.
Oh, yeah, it's probably actually the hardest I've laughed watching. It's probably my favorite gag.
What's up there? Um, I don't know. I mean I like a lot of the gags with Tanaka and Nishinoya too, but
Oh, yeah.
anyway.
I really like the gag from like a previous episode where Hinata is like bugging, or I think it was Suki because he keeps popping in and out of frame as Suki's walking away. It's like, huh? Hey, great job, man! Great job! Great job!
Yeah, yeah.
Or, of course, the gag where Hinata actually has to be explained preemptively about what Ushiwaka's insult
Oh
meant.
yeah, yeah. He has to get tutoring on how he was just insulted. Yeah,
Yeah, but anyway, I think we can probably save this for the season wrap up.
yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. Yeah, top
so do
10
you want to move
best
on?
Haikyuu gags. Yeah, so March comes in like a lion.
Yeah, yeah,
All right,
yeah.
so
Let's go on to
episode
that.
7. So this starts out with chapter 3 of the Son of God or Child of God, excuse me. Which basically just means it's continuing directly the plot from the last episode. Um,
Right.
so it basically picks up where the last one left off with Rei sitting in the McDonald's and talking to Takahashi, who's the captain of Hana's school baseball team. It turns out that Takahashi actually decided to go to this school because they had a good baseball program, even though it was far away from his home. So he's from a rural area, but he moved to the city in order to go to this school to pursue a baseball career. And he did it because his father told him about Rei, because Rei became a pro shogi player in middle school, and his father said, well, if this middle schooler can follow his dreams, why can't you? And so that's what he did, and he asked Rei why Rei went back to high school. And basically Rei explains that he was, he had quit high school when he became a pro, but he wanted to get rid of the memories of quitting, so he wanted to go back and finish what he'd started. And Takahashi immediately understood that, because he understood that anytime you choose not to do the hard thing to pursue either your sport or the kind of life you want, it really undermines everything else you do. And he basically thanked Rei. He said, "Thank you for explaining where you come from. I totally understand." And in this moment, Rei gets overwhelmed. He gets emotionally overwhelmed. He says he feels like crying, and that he's so happy that he let his guard down and spoke honestly with someone. Um, and he basically says that he really wants to talk to Takahashi again, because he hasn't had that kind of conversation before. Um, so Takahashi leaves, and then Hana and Rei thank each other, and then talk about how cool Takahashi is. um, and so at the end of the chapter, Rei is he can't sleep, and he sits up to himself, and he thinks about how someday he would like to have a conversation with Soya, the Child of God, the Japanese shogi champion. He'd like to sit down with him and have a similar conversation about what it's like to be on the other side of the goal, aka what is it like to be a shogi champion, the same way that
Right.
Takahashi wanted to talk to Rei about being a professional. Um, so in the second chapter, Hana's freaking out because Takahashi comes over and she's making curry for them. Because Rei and Hana both wanted to see Takahashi again, so they invited him over. Um, and then they sit down, and Takahashi has actually brought over a VHS recording of Rei's match on TV, the NHK Cup, which they alluded to in like the second episode. And you actually sit down and you watch the match, and Rei remembers how he actually took an unnecessary risk to break the stalemate in the match.
Right.
And Nikaido is announcing on the TV, and he yells at Rei that he's playing recklessly and that he's not taking care of his own shogi or taking care of himself. Um, and then Rei gets mad at Nikaido on TV, yelling at him, and he yells back at the TV. So there's Rei yelling at the TV, uh, basically indignant that Nikaido's telling him to take care of himself. Hana says that's the first time you've ever raised your voice. Um, but she sort of thinks it's nice. She ends up asking if Rei can teach her to play shogi, and once again he's emotionally overwhelmed by the fact that someone's interested in what he does. So he does go out, he gets her some shogi materials, and then he tries to teach her shogi, but he's too technical and they don't understand it. And Hana gets bored, so then Nikaido sits down and he shows them a picture book about how to play shogi, and they're very interested. And Rei feels excluded and useless, but not in a depressed way, but kind of in a more comedic way. And that's the end of the
Right.
episode.
Okay, so this episode we almost got our shogi lessons.
Yeah, exactly.
That was my major takeaway from this episode.
Yeah, I almost understood a
Uh,
little more.
yeah, just a little bit more. I like how they actually do handle the whole thing with basically Ray being a very boring teacher and giving I think her name is actually Hina. I forget.
What?
Uh, I like the way that they make it so that Ray's actually very bad at teaching Hina
Yeah.
because this is a guy who has not spent much time dealing with people. This is a guy who has basically been very afraid to talk to people and reach out to other people about aspects about his life. And so the fact that he's very bad at doing this, it seems very fitting for him. The fact that he just wants to give them a very straight explanation. And I thought that was pretty well done. Not only, and I kind of liked the fact that Nikaido has been kind of a growing presence in their life as well. I'm kind of confused about this whole book that he decided to write on shogi.
What do you mean?
Well, the fact that he had a chill because he wrote the. If you look at the book, it says that he's the one who wrote that picture book.
Oh, really? I didn't notice that at
Oh
all.
yeah, I caught that immediately. Like, why did you do it? When did you have the time? At what point did you think this would be useful? I mean, clearly it was.
Huh.
Um,
So
I thought that.
one quick question before we move on. Did I spend that entire section referring to Hina as Hana?
You did, yes.
I so good.
I'm sorry, I didn't notice it at first until the very end, and I was like, "Has he been saying Hana?"
Yeah, so this is I think it's the fact that I'm watching so much more anime these days and trying to keep them separate with this. Hana is the main character from Wolf Children. It's the mother in Wolf Children, which I
Oh,
watched
okay.
recently. And so for some reason, all these similar names I end up conflating. And so I apologize
I
for
mean,
that.
I was referring to Takumi last episode, or Takuma as Takumi last episode.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've
So
missed up
we,
Miyuki and Mizuki too between Days and All Out. So
yeah, no,
anyway,
it's
names are
fine.
hard, especially when, some of them are unfamiliar. But
Right,
anyway,
that's fair.
um, one of the things I wanted to hit on with this is just how interesting it is that the first chapter of this episode and the two before it were all called Child of God.
Right,
And they were all, so they were all referring to Soya, the Japanese champ. Um, but you never actually meet him or interact with him or add anything other than a couple memories of Ray seeing him in passing.
right,
Um, and I kind of like where that ended up, which is that, Ray had these interesting interactions with, mostly with Takahashi, but then with Hina. Um, and which sort of opened him up to the possibility of connecting emotionally with someone who was interested in what he did. And he said, like, that was so great, like that I've never felt anything like that. But he clearly identifies with Soya, and he says, I wish I could have that kind of conversation with him. I wish I could know what it's like to be a champion at shogi. So I
right,
think this sort of cements our theory from earlier that Soya is supposed to be a stand-in for a certain direction that Ray's life can go, sort of towards the isolation and the pure focus on shogi. So he still wants to know what that's like because he's still pursuing that path. But I think
right.
eventually we may get there where he sits down with Soya and realizes, oh, this isn't the path I should be on. This is a path of isolation, not a path of growth and community. And where I'm finding the most reward is through sitting down in McDonald's with like a guy from some girls'
From
school
baseball team.
baseball team and talking about your dreams. Like that's where I really get fulfillment, not shogi, but he's still pursuing it. So it's
Right.
interesting where he's starting to learn what his real priorities are, and he hasn't totally figured it out yet.
Well, we got, yeah, that's about what. It's kind of what I was about to say. Was that this episode is basically about Ray finding motivation
Hmm.
because he even starts off this episode thinking like, I don't really have any sort of motivation for playing shogi.
Yeah.
I just because like the only thing is that It's like I have no real reason to win, but the only reason I even do it is because I hate to lose even more.
Yeah.
So this actually gives him some sort of focus for something for him to work
Mm-hmm.
towards, which is basically this notion that if he can ever get good enough, he can actually go and speak to the shogi master or the current master.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I hadn't thought of it that way, but that's probably what they were going for.
Right. Um, and not only that, but he's starting to kind of reach out more. He's like because now Hina again has kind of broken through to Ray a little bit more because she wants to learn about shogi.
Mm-hmm.
She approaches him and she's like, "I'd like you to teach me about it."
Yeah, so in that conversation where she says, "I'd like you to teach me about shogi," and then earlier when he has this meaningful conversation with Takahashi, do you want to explain some of like what's going on with the animation during those sequences when Ray's describing how he's feeling?
Uh, Basically, I didn't actually take that many notes on that. Um, I seem to recall it basically being like we're starting to see some like really bright gold colors, like it's like the sun has just risen for him
Mm-hmm.
almost. Like we get like it's very I recall a lot of imagery where it's basically just the two like of Ray and Takahashi talking and there's just this glittering sunset in the background like these warm golden colors.
Mm-hmm.
Um
Yeah,
and like
and I saw that mostly as a contrast to the imagery when he has imagery of being stuck in his own head per se. It's
right.
of drowning or struggling to
Like
swim or the water, and even when he's standing on the ground, it's just dark. It's pitch dark the whole time. So I thought this is like a
right.
complete surprise. Like he's been stuck in his
Yeah,
head so long, he's surprised at the fact that light comes in. And I thought it was a
right.
pretty useful image in terms of
Right.
communicating what he's feeling.
Yeah. I would agree with that. Because yeah, it's like it almost felt like an eruption almost
Mm,
like because it's like this is somebody who's been held down for just so long, and then just suddenly where we start seeing in his head just all of this color and light and warmth come in. It's almost overwhelming.
yeah.
Like this sensation, it's like it helps us kind of feel the sensation that he is actually feeling right now. Just about how like it's almost too much to
Well,
handle.
yeah, and I like that they went, you might say, over the top with the imagery because it's hard to understand why a conversation at a table at McDonald's in which one guy who he's never met before says, "Oh, thanks, that makes a lot of sense. I appreciate you telling me
Right.
that." That was the thing that overwhelmed it, but it's because he doesn't have conversations like that. He doesn't have conversations where people are interested in him as a person, or people who look up to him, or people who want to learn from him, or people who are excited to talk to it. Like that is a new sensation for him, or
Right. And
some.
it's kind of a new sensation for the viewer.
Mm-hmm.
Like as well because we're so used to being just dragged down and like hit over the head and like it almost feels like we're choking watching this
Yeah.
sometimes. Um so yeah, on that happy note,
Yeah, you want to talk about some ping pong girls?
yeah, let's talk about it.
All right. So Scorching Ping Pong Girls episode 7. Basically, this is the beginning of the practice match against Moyama, uh, excuse me, Moseyama Junior High, and they are a nationally ranked team that uh, the the girls are sort of intimidated by, but they know it'll be good practice. And they've already met one of the characters, the creepy green-haired girl, and they meet up with her again. And turns out that her name is Kururi, and the captain of Moseyama is Zakuro. And so Zakuro and Kururi are these nationally known players who are really good, but they have kind of a weird relationship in which they're friends, but Kururi clearly has a deep emotional attachment to Zakuro that Zakuro doesn't particularly understand or acknowledge, and it's a little off, but I think it's supposed to be treated comedically, even though if these were real people, it would be a deeply disturbing,
Right.
emotionally flawed relationship. um, but anyway, a lot of boring crap happens in the first half of the episode, where they have cutesy little interactions, and Kururi and Koyori get locked in a talk in the bathroom because Koyori locks herself inside, and it's dumb.
It's a callback actually to the first
Oh yeah,
episode.
where she gets stuck on top of the gate. Wow,
Yeah.
I didn't even notice that. See,
It was kind of a it was kind of a meaningless callback though.
yeah,
So
exactly. Like as if that was a foundational image or anything. Um,
right.
so they're eventually they get out of the bathroom, and then Kururi says that she's going to defeat Koyori when they actually have their match. Um, because merely having a good game isn't enough to pay the friendship fee for Zakuro. And then Zakuro walks in, and Kururi hugs her, and Zakuro goes, "What?" because she doesn't understand anything. The important part of this episode is that they start the match. So the first match is Hanabi playing Sasurita, who is also known as the Scorpion.
Scorpion.
Yeah, exactly. Um, Hanabi is able to win the first two games because of her speed. She's able to control the pace of the game, but she then loses the next two because she's worn out, and Sasurita is able to throw off her pacing by forcing Hanabi to play long ball instead of playing close to the table. Um, and so Hanabi's never able to speed up the pace and get into a volley, and Sasurita is basically able to exhaust her and dominate. So the animation in that section is actually really good. It's a well done match. It's fun to watch. But that's really the only meaningful content in the episode. It ends
Right.
up by setting up the next match between Yuragi on the other team, also known as Pendulum, which is a great nickname for a junior high ping pong player, I guess, against Hokuto, in which Yuragi wins the first game off screen and sort of bobs side to side and is very happy with herself. But you don't actually see how, and so presumably the next episode will set it up.
Okay. So I don't know about you. I've actually kind of grown numb to a lot of the otaku baiting stuff.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, that's why I skipped so much of the first half of the episode because there was no content. Like it was.
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, it's kind of like it's dumb, but I almost kind of don't care anymore.
I mostly
Oh.
spend the episodes waiting for them to actually play ping pong, and then I tune in.
Yeah. There was one thing I did think was a little funny because Kira, when they first enter the club room, Kirika is already laying on Mune Mune's chest, and I did think that was actually just a little funny, just on the basis of they're not even setting this up as a joke anymore. This is just an aspect to her character now. Just deal with it.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
like, oh yeah, she's laying on her chest. That's just what she does. Get over it.
Yep.
It's like I almost just don't even care if they're not. I mean, if they're not gonna like waste time in an episode bringing it up,
Well, because
like
they're
setting it
not.
up as a gag.
Because they're not trying
Well,
to draw attention to like whoa boobs. Then
right,
okay, who cares? That's better than it was when it was first introduced.
right. It's just like yeah, that's their character trait. That's what she does. That's
Well,
fine.
it's the same way that Kirika is incapable of wearing a shirt in which her left shoulder is not exposed.
Or how Hokuto apparently is incapable of wearing a shirt that doesn't have like that doesn't cover her mouth.
Yeah, exactly. So
Because like with
that just has to be
but
their design no matter what. She always has to have her left
right,
shoulder out because she's just so loose, and Hokuto always has to have that her mouth covered because she's ice cold. You know, whatever,
right.
whatever.
Uh, I'm kind of mixed on Kururi. Like, okay, so there's a moment where like the team captain is talking to the rest of the team, and everybody is kind of like scared, and they cut into show behind her, and like Kururi is just like giving everybody this terrible death stare.
Yeah,
It's like okay, that was actually kind of funny. I thought.
yeah. It
Like
was a
I
good
got a
sight
chuckle
gag.
out of it. It's a good sight gag, and the fact that I am kind of amused by the revelation as well that Kururi is just sort of weirdly obsessive and not really because it's like when they first brought up the whole thing about the friendship to me, I thought this was going to be something about where like this is the evil school,
Oh yeah, exactly.
like where like Kururi is actually this very nice person, but she feels like she's being forced into it.
Hmm.
Um,
Turns out she just
and
made
like
it up.
no, yeah, no, it's all in her head.
Exactly.
And it's like Zakura's like, "What are you doing? Like, we're friends. It's fine."
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, okay, that's kind of funny, and I kind of like that about her character. But then she has to keep dragging out this whole like death thing.
Yeah, well, she just throws it in like a pun to every sentence, and it's
Right?
so
It's like
boring.
right. Well, it's like I don't mind the stuff where it's like it's like deathly sorry of that or something like that. That's whatever. I don't care. But then it's just like, is death so? It's like as opposed to
Is
like,
that
is that
so?
so?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, you are really stretching this gag. Maybe this is a joke that doesn't translate well to English. Like, maybe there's something about the word that in Japanese that sounds like it in, that sounds like death in Japanese as well. But it's like, this isn't a pun that works, and it just is stupid and annoying,
Yeah.
and I hate it.
Yeah. Most of it is stupid and annoying. But the match itself was nice. Did you have any thoughts
Yeah, and it
about
seems like
that?
we're mostly into the matches right now. And this is the part where Scorching Ping Pong Girls has always been good, pretty much no matter what.
Yeah.
Um, and it's fun to see a match, a different type of match. There is one thing I would like to point out that I thought was interesting was I did like how the one important thing that happened at the beginning of the episode was that Hokuto did choose out a rubber for Koyori.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the fact that what she did for it was that she did find a rubber that kind of suited her unique playstyle, which was like, I gave her a rubber that gave the ball a satisfying clank, because I figured she's an emotional player, and therefore, like, the clank would make it sound more satisfying, so she'd get into it easier.
Yeah, it sort of plays on her specific strength being the fact that she has fun. Like somehow
Right.
that she plays better the more fun she has, so why not have a paddle that
Yeah,
sounds fun?
right. And I thought that actually, again, it's like, when it goes into ping pong, I think this series does some interesting things.
Hmm.
I feel like a lot of this episode is also to kind of set up because this was the team that beat the main team that we saw at the beginning of the series, right?
No.
No. Okay, never mind. I'll shut up.
Nope. Sorry. But this is a team that was at nationals.
Okay. Okay, fair enough. So I guess I do appreciate that they're kind of showing this to set like this is again like kind of establishing power of the different team. The fact that for example, we know that Tenka loses like she's supposed to be the number 2 or I guess actually technically number 4 on the team
Uh-huh.
now. But the fact that she loses in this kind of weird drawn out match after she almost had it, this is kind of meant to show off. Okay, this team is a real threat now,
Hmm.
and the fact that we kind of ended on this part where Hokuto is on the verge of losing.
Yeah, so you've got to imagine that Hokuto is going to lose her match because the series doesn't care that much about Hokuto and Hanabi. Um,
Right.
but and then so they'll be down 2-0 and they'll have to win their last 3, so you'll get to see them win because Kirika and Mune Mune will be a doubles team and you'll finally get to see their elite doubles talent, which is apparently a
Right.
thing. And then of course you'll see Koyori teach Kururi how to enjoy ping pong through the power of her smashes or something.
Yeah, no, that sounds about
And
right.
then Agari will prove why she's the true driver of the North. Like, honestly, that's my expectation for the next 2 episodes.
I don't know that much. I could see them doing something where Hokuto wins. So because I think that okay, so we're assuming that the series is going to write this well. I could see them, and they do generally do the ping pong matches pretty well. I could see them having them do something like have Hokuto win, and then set up so that Kirika and Mune win their match as a doubles team. So kind of give them a little bit of a kind of like give him a little bit of an edge, and then have a Gari lose, so Koyori has to come in and basically save the team.
Oh, maybe. I was assuming Agari was going to play last because I think she's currently the ace.
Okay, is she still technically the ace? I wasn't sure about that.
Honestly, I can't keep up.
All right. Well, do you want to go into another series that, that I guess we can keep up with?
Good segue. You're killing it. Yes, let's discuss All Out.
Good.
All right, so it is. They're basically wrapping up the training camp. They show how Guion is the first to wake up one day and yell that he's first to wake up because he can't wait to play rugby because he loves rugby. And everyone gets mad at him, but partly because he wakes them up, and then later because he still can't catch a pass. He doesn't know how to catch a rugby ball. He doesn't really know how to do anything except tackle. But then the coach sets them up and they have an inter-squad game. So Guion is actually playing. He's playing with the A team or the starters, and he gets the first tackle. He's able to make a clean tackle. But then after that, he's not able to make a clean tackle again because the other team figures out that he's easy to trick because he doesn't know rugby strategy. So he's not able to make a tackle. He drops passes, and he effectively is unable to stop anyone or do anything effective on offense. So by the end of the first half, his team is down by a wide margin. And he gets pulled from the game, and the coach says that the fact that his team is losing is all Guion's fault because he doesn't know how to do anything, and he plays selfishly. Guion has a flashback about how when he was growing up, he was never allowed to play on team sports because he was too short, but he always wanted to be on a team. It's just that his older brother thought he was an annoying kid, and the other kids at school thought he was short and wouldn't give him the time of day, and eventually he had so many anger problems that even when his height wasn't an issue, he would get kicked off of teams because he would get in fights. And so he started to wonder. He walks away from the training camp and decides that there's something wrong with him, that it's his fault that he can never be a team player. And eventually they find Guion sitting on the roof, and Iwa asks him whether he is basically whether he's so focused on tackles, Guion is. And he asks whether Guion is tackling people because he wants to get the ball back and play rugby, or if he's tackling people because he wants to enact his revenge against all the big guys who ever told him he was too little to play. Guion doesn't actually respond to that. He doesn't say anything for this whole section. Eventually he does come back down, though. And the next day they do some more training, but then they finish off with another inter-squad. Guion isn't playing, but he's sitting on the sidelines, and eventually he gets so absorbed with the game and he wants to play the game, and he sees how much everyone else cares about it that the coach lets him come in. And he's actually able to stop the other team from scoring, and he saves the game for the team he gets put in on. And the coach says that finally Guion has learned a little bit about how to not play selfishly, and that he says that the team has a chance as long as they can focus on the group instead of the individual. Guion is excited, and he feels like basically the team comes around and says that he's finally a member of the team, because he's learned not to play selfishly, and then they all go out for dinner. The end.
It was a decent episode. My major takeaway from this was that a lot of this needed to be in the first episode.
Yep. Much like March comes in like a lion, you get all the background on the main character way too late.
Yeah, kind of. Though I'm not going to talk about Marshall Light comes into like a lion. I think it was a little bit more effective in that than in this.
Yes.
But I do feel like that because we talked about this in our first discussion of it, about this whole thing about how the fact that Guion, the fact that he's short is kind of treated as a joke, but also as his main character motivation.
Exactly.
They needed to have all of this first before they started treating it as a joke.
Yeah, I don't know why they didn't. I assume it's because it was just like a straight adaptation of the manga, but
Right.
told in this format, it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, to throw that in at first, because there's nothing really all that compelling about Gion without all of
Well,
this.
yeah, and one thing we've complained about is the fact that there's been no main character up to this point because it wasn't clear whether Gion was someone we should focus on or not until episode 7.
Right. And like, and even now it does kind of have the problem of, because it did focus on him for this episode. Is the series going to keep focusing on his development, or are they going to keep going for this whole team dynamic?
Yeah.
Because they kind of built up Iwashimizu and Ibumi before anybody else, and like Sekizan to an extent as well.
hmm Yeah, but none of them
Uh,
really got any meaningful screen time this episode.
yeah, exactly. So, but that being said, despite my complaints that this should have come before, it's still good that we got it.
Yep.
Uh, I did appreciate the fact that basically we finally understand that Gion has basically like. I like the fact that they address the fact that Gion wants to beat up big guys, and that was always his motivation for playing on the team.
hmm
Like, I get like the fact that he was able to take on. It kind of relates back to the fact that what he really wanted to do was take down Sekizan, which is how he learned how to do the low tackle in the first place.
Right.
Because that was kind of the first time he's ever had this means of actually like taking on people that were bigger than him.
hmm
Um, but beyond that, I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. There wasn't a lot to latch onto. It was most of the episode was justifying the flashbacks and building up Gion. And once
Right.
you get to the end of the episode, you sort of say like, "All right," that was about the limit of my reaction. Was like, "Okay, that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. No.
That's
So now he's playing on the team.
that's good." But it didn't really inspire much beyond that. I'm glad that the training camp is over. Hopefully, we'll get to see some interesting matches now. Um, but I don't know. I'm glad that we got a little bit more character depth, but it certainly was a long time coming. Um,
Yeah.
I continue to maintain that this is a slightly above average show, but not by much. A
Yeah.
lot of it is paint by the numbers, um, but there's a few things that are fun. I will say I do look forward to watching All Out because I don't totally know what to expect with it, and it's a fun group of characters. But it's nothing. I mean, I would be surprised if I was still thinking about it at all, 6 months from now.
Right. Yeah. That's kind of a fair point. Kind of like, oh, we're gonna fire some shots here. Kuroko's basketball.
Yeah, gosh. Like, I don't know why everybody fixates on that one, but man, that's a forgettable show. Um,
Well, maybe we'll talk about that
lots of
some other
lots of
time.
cute boys with basketball superpowers, but other than that,
Right. Uh, so yeah, I mean that's pretty much all we got to say about this, I guess. I didn't really have anything all that interesting to say about it beyond, yeah, this should have happened before.
yeah, same here. So Days,
Yeah.
another uninteresting sports anime. Gosh, this is such a good podcast, Matt. Let's
Who
talk
wants to learn
about
about the
some
mediocre sports anime that comes out, along with like the one or two really good ones?
Exactly. Well, that's why we put them up front, right?
Yeah.
So if you were decide to stop listening at this point in the podcast, we will not blame you. But with that bold recommendation, let's move forward to Days. So it starts off with a flashback to Keijo Gawara, which is this new rival school, and how the team started with a couple of guys standing out in front of the school and kicking a soccer ball and deciding that they were going to start their own soccer team and make history. Meanwhile, the Seiseki boys are playing, but it's pouring rain, and in the first half, Oshibara has been injured, and the everybody's sitting around watching the game, but they're worried because Oshibara got injured. The other team is playing really aggressively and getting a lot of fouls. They make an attempt to to kick one of the Seiseki players in the face, basically. I think it was Kimishita. And then Mizuki grabs that other character, that opposing character, by the shirt and pulls him down. Mizuki gets a yellow card, meaning he'll be suspended from the next game. Um, Ultimately, Mizuki is able to rally and score 4 goals by himself off screen, of course. Um, but by the end of the episode, Oshibara is injured, so he's not allowed to play. Kazuma is still hurt, so he can't play, and Mizuki is suspended for the next game because of his 2 yellow cards. Um, so the next game is against this new team, Keijo that's taken the world by storm. All the Seiseki boys are motivated. And so they start the game off, and Kimishita actually tries to score right from the get-go. He's not able to, but then, surprise, surprise, Sakamoto steals the ball from the other team and passes it back to Kimishita, and then Kimishita looks real intimidating, and he says, "Don't underestimate Seiseki." Because now...
Yeah, don't underestimate one of the best schools in the district, huh?
I know, exactly, yeah. Once again, Seiseki, they can't make up their minds as to whether they're an underdog or not.
Yeah.
Which I guess it makes sense because their 3 forwards are out, but also no one underestimates Seiseki. You're one of the quote-unquote fearsome 4 of the best schools in Tokyo. So I don't know why you have this complex about being an underdog. Maybe it just makes the narrative work better.
Yeah, I don't know. So I have like no notes for this. I have like a couple of things I did want to address though.
Okay.
First of all, the nicknames in this series suck. Okay, like, in like Scorching Ping Pong Girls, we may make our complaints, but I kind of love the crazy nicknames like the Scorpion,
Yeah, exactly. Or the Pendulum.
Or the Pendulum,
the Driver of the North.
Here it's like, oh, they're the Big 3 or the Fearsome 4.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, there's no snap to that. There's nothing fun to say. Like God, even you can't even get the nicknames right.
Exactly. I mean, Keijo, they're the rising champions or whatever. They're supposed to be this scary, intimidating team that's only been around for 2 years, but they're gonna get you. And that's like, okay, well, I have no reason to believe that because you've never seen them play before, or introduced them before, or said anything about their history. But if you say so,
right. Like a better series would be like, okay, so like they would probably spend a little bit of time with like a game, like having them take down like a big team, like what was the team that they played before?
Seikon?
Like the one that capped off the last season.
Oh.
Like have them play that team in like a match or something like that. Like maybe like in an exhibition match, or like reference that they played them in an exhibition match.
Exactly.
And like,
but instead this show kept all the other teams we've ever known anything about and put them in a separate division so we'd never see them again.
Yeah, exactly. There are 2 other things I'd like to address. First of all, one thing you did skip over in your summary, and I do not blame you for it because it is incredibly creepy. Yeah, you know what I'm about to bring up. So they have this incredibly awkward Keijo gets their entire team together to watch this video, the secret video that they took of Seiseki. And as it turns out, they just decided, because it's an all-boys academy, they decided just to film Ubukata from the other team. Or, their team manager, Seiseki's team manager. And it's just like, they have to go through this very creepy, first they started her legs, and they filmed down from the legs, then they lift it up to the chest, and they're disappointed that she doesn't have much of a chest, but hey, you know what, she's still a girl. And then they see the face like, oh my god, she's so pretty. And all I can think is, do you guys not have the internet?
Yeah, it's very strange that they had to send someone in secretly specifically to film the other team's manager. And it seems like it's not like she has a reputation or anything. They've never seen her before and they have no idea what to expect. But they all get together because they just found out that a girl exists. And they want to sit around in a group and be like, oh my gosh, she has a butt. And that's very exciting. Guys, this isn't Keijo. We can't get that excited about girls' butts.
Oh, that would make a great segue to Keijo, but I did have one other thing I wanted to bring up about days.
Okay, fine.
Okay, so there's this one other scene where they have this scene where just before they start the game, the coach is going in and he's thinking to himself, "Oh no, the boys are going to be like really nervous and upset because they don't have like their three, they don't have Ushibara, they don't have Mizuki, and they don't have Kazuma, so they're going to be really down and depressed." And it's like, okay, so they're clearly building it up to basically like play with your expectations, because he's standing there in front of the door and he opens up the door. And, this would be the time to like do like an obvious gag, like having them like do something like really silly or weird. No, they're just sort of like fired up and ready to go.
Yeah.
And all I can think during this segment is like, this is the most boring thing you could have possibly done for this sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. He walks in and he's worried. I don't think they're going to be motivated for this game. But then he opens the door and they are motivated for this game.
For this game,
and nothing
right.
else. They're just standing around complimenting each other and saying that they believe in themselves. Like, it's such a great opportunity. Well, it's cheap, but it would be a cheap opportunity for humor. And honestly, if they had been like running around with their underpants on their head, I would have probably laughed.
Right.
And so
Yeah,
it would have been
exactly,
so easy to do literally anything.
Anything else.
And they didn't, because that's...
They just like, oh, okay, so they're... Okay, we think they're tense, they are not. End of story.
Yeah, exactly. And it spent about 3 minutes on that. So
Yeah.
I don't know. All right, let's cover the emotional depths of Keijo.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Okay, so this episode, we start off with Miyata entering the room. Nozomi strips down and asks Miyata if there's anything wrong with her body.
Oh no.
And then she she talks about her nipples in great detail, and then she takes off her panties and asks about her butt. In which case, Miyata comically overreacts and knocks her out of the room because your roommate just started stripping and wants you to like acknowledge her body. And then basically what happens is we start going more into the training of Nozomi, where she is basically we have the setup for essentially the big skill that she needs to learn.
Oh wait, so when she's trying to talk about her body, is that because she's trying to figure out the secret weakness that was alluded to last time?
Yes, that is correct. Okay. I mean that's the gag, but I mean that's supposed to be what she's alluding to, but of course Miyata doesn't understand that, and there's just all sorts of laughs to be had.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
About this. So first of all, she starts going over, like, after, all the hilarity has calmed down, she starts calmly talking with Miyata and asking if there's an issue with her body. And eventually they determine, through basically Nozomi doing, like, more butt figure eights, that she's going slower than she used to. And the reason for that was that her special training from before has basically added a lot more mass to her butt, and so she's not used to dealing with the weight down there anymore. She's built up all this extra muscle that she doesn't know what to do with.
Okay.
So basically, her trainer, whose name is Kyoko, basically this is sort of the classic setup for like any sort of training session where they have her doing this sort of random meaningless task that's actually supposed to open up this greater, like, knowledge of what she's been doing wrong or what she can learn to do. And what they have her do is, so they put her out on a farm, and they have her start pulling out turnips with her butt. Basically, they tie a rope around kind of her butt area, and she has to pull out the turnip, and she basically has to twist her butt in order to pull out the turnips. Now, the only thing about this is, for every turnip she, like, breaks as she does this, they have to pay for. And so she needs to basically learn how to pull out all these turnips without breaking them.
Okay.
And so she tries to do this, and naturally she's having a lot of problems. She's not able to do it. Eventually, the number one elite, whose name is Kusaki, visits Nozomi, and she basically wants to know what she's doing. And what happens is, so she does it. She basically asks to try what Nozomi's doing. She does it on her first try. And Nozomi's very confused about this. And she asks, Kusaki for any advice that she can give her, and she basically says, well, if you, she'll basically tell her if she goes to bed with her and she starts groping her.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, that got awkward real quick. However, Nozomi eventually figures out what to do because she steps back from Kusaki. She knocks into like this cart that's behind her that has the turnips, and and then like basically the cart moves and then the turnips move basically. So this somehow kind of alludes to her how she's supposed to be moving the muscles in her butt in order to pull out these turnips. And then all of a sudden, like storm clouds roll in, it starts raining really hard, and there's lightning. And then she manages to do it. Like this is, I guess, supposed to be like setting up atmosphere for like this great intense training she's about to partake. But she's finally able to pull out these turnips without breaking them. And that is the end of this. That is the end of the episode.
Really engaging stuff. So.
The animation also kind of took a hit this episode.
Oh,
Like
no.
the characters really felt off model a lot of times. It wasn't a very good episode. I kind of appreciate the parody of the whole the training session, of the sort of the weird meaningless training session. But I mean, really, it was just kind of like any other one, outside of the fact that we had some groping in there.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't really have much else to add about it. It wasn't that great. I mean, it's pretty much standard at this point. The series can't seem to really determine whether or not it wants to be parody or serious. Like, I'm trying to think of a good example of this. Like, of a series that, okay, so I know you don't want to hear it, but Prison School is a good example that does this well.
Oh, yay.
Where it does the parody very well in a sense that because they tell it so straight that you just, with such ridiculous situations, that you just kind of have to laugh at it, basically.
Well, yeah, clearly Keijo doesn't know what it is because the creator came out and said before it started, he's like, this isn't a fan service show. We want to tell a serious story about an interesting sport.
Right.
And so even if there is some parody in there, there's potentially some conflict on the creative staff about exactly what kind of story they want to tell.
Right, because clearly what they saw when they adapted this is, hey, girls are fighting with their butts. This sounds like a great fan servicey type of thing.
Right.
Yeah, because there's also like a random shower sequence that doesn't really like. There's this weird bath sequence that doesn't feel like it should have been there.
Oh, good.
Where basically all the girls are like playing around in the bath. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I just want to move on to Long Riders because I kind of want to rant about that.
Okay, let's do it. All right. So, Long Riders, episode 5.
Whereas everything else is on 7 or 8.
Yeah,
We're on
it
5.
will never stop being funny to me how many episodes Long Riders has missed so far. But anyway, so we start off with Amy getting a road bike at Alpaca, and so she's finally able to afford her road bike from her maid cafe stuff. They never even bring up how she paid for it or when, but whatever. She meets up with the girls and they run into Hinako and Yayoi's friend from the college bike club, Saki. Oh my gosh, it turns out Saki's actually the girl that Amy and Aoi met on the mountain. And isn't that a crazy coincidence? And They talk about Amy's new road bike. And Amy says that with this bike, I can do things I've never done before. So with that kind of well thought out internal narration, we move on to Amy going on her first solo ride. So she went on one ride with the group, it went really well, and then she wanted to ride again, but no one else could go, so she rides by herself. She takes the same route as she and Aoi did in the second episode, but it's a lot easier because she actually has a functional bike now instead of a child's toy. She unfortunately hits a pothole and she has to change her tire, but she realizes she doesn't know how to change her tire and she destroys all her spares. and then some other people from her college bike group. Maybe it wasn't totally clear who they were, or
Yeah.
whether Saki was one of them. It was a girl with long black hair, but they didn't acknowledge whether it was Saki or not. Helped to change her tire, and then Amy goes and she rides and gets ice cream, and she runs into Aoi there, and they eat ice cream together. And the dramatic conclusion is that Amy decides that she likes riding bikes with her friends.
Okay. So, in a rare twist, I am going to just slightly defend this episode,
Okay.
but not very much.
All right. Dive right in.
There is one scene that I actually really liked in this episode, and that is actually the scene where she is sitting at the ice cream store. Because all we get is just very ambient noise, and Amy is just sitting there by herself. She kind of takes a picture of her ice cream and sends it to her friends. Because this, to me, says, okay, this girl is very lonely if she's taking pictures of her food and wants, like, responses from her friends about it, okay?
Yeah.
And there's a nice little part where she kind of, like, her phone actually buzzes, and she very excitedly checks it out, and she sees that, it's like, oh, she got an email from, like, the alpaca store or something like that about, like, hey, we got a sale going on.
Yeah, exactly.
And, she kind of puts her phone back down dejectedly. And I appreciated how quiet the scene was and how very well it captured, like, what it's kind of like. You're bored. You're lonely, and you don't know what else to do. You're checking your phone, and you're kind of overreacting to even just, like, the slightest, like, reaction from your phone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've all been there.
Because yeah, kind of. It's like, this was a very boring scene that I think was actually in its favor.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it captured the essence of that very well.
Yeah, that's true. That was a nice little moment. Now that I think of it, it came at the end of a very unintentionally boring episode.
We had a very interesting, boring scene that took place at the very end of a very boring episode.
Yeah. That was nice. And then she runs into Aoi and decides, like, hey, I missed you today. Basically, is all she says. Like, it's more fun when we're together. Which, fine. But, like, the fact that we're 5 episodes in and they still haven't brought up the fact that Aoi and Amy, I guess they brought up the possibility that they could join the bike club, but they never even asked them. So
yeah, that's a fair point. I hadn't even quite thought about that.
So look at where we're at. They have a max of 13 episodes. They've already missed 2. So in this season, they can have a max of 11 episodes, meaning they only have 6 episodes left in order to go from not yet being asked to join the bike club to competing against other colleges in bike competitions. Yeah. Like, clearly they were supposed to be further than this on the plot, so I don't know whether the show is just going to skip stuff and try to make the plot make sense and jump over it, or whether they're going to just do the original 11 episodes the way they plotted it and just put the last 2 on the Blu-ray or something.
Yeah, they might just have to do that. Maybe they weren't really even expecting to have that many episodes. It might just continue into next season.
I don't think it was originally supposed to, but maybe. The other interesting aspect to this is that within the first week of this season, I think it was Sentai licensed Long Riders for release in the United States. Which will be interesting because you got to wonder whether they'll go back and be like, okay, before we release this, you got to do the rest of this show, and you got to fix all the crappy animation.
Right, which is actually something that they do tend to do for Blu-ray releases. So
that's true. They always polish it up for the Blu-ray release, but this is so dramatically bad, you know.
Which is funny that you bring that up as well, because this was an episode that I saw the most glaring continuity error with the editing. So when we come back from the bumper, there's a scene where Amy is like, she's stopped at like the bridge, and she's like, oh wow, this feels so good. And you see her, she's in her blue biking gear. And then and then it cuts to the next scene, and all of a sudden she's in her pink her pink collared shirt that she's been wearing that she wears for the rest of the episode.
Oh, that's funny. I didn't notice
and
that.
It's like, where did your biking gear go?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of weird beats. There's the fact that on her first ride with her road bike, she like gets stuff in her eyes, and they say, "Oh, well, you better buy some eyewear," and she's like, "Oh, they're so expensive. I don't know if I'll ever be able to buy it." And then in the next scene when she's riding, she just has eyewear.
She has it.
Yeah, it's not acknowledged that she bought it. She just has it. Whatever.
I also kind of feel like the fact that this friend of theirs, what was her name again?
Saki,
Saki, I think.
yeah.
Yeah. So the fact that we are like they try and write it off as the fact of, oh, she's just a friend. She's a cycling friend that we don't really get to see too often, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then in this very episode, we see her go visit. Oh my god, what's the
Hinako.
Oh my god, yeah, her. She goes to visit her. She goes to visit Hanako at her Chinese restaurant.
Exactly, just pops in. We
It
never
just pops
see
in.
her until all the time this episode.
Yeah, exactly. And I kind of feel like that's going to be a trend from here on out because it's going to be like, oh yeah, we don't see her ever.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, now that they've decided to introduce her to the group, now she's just going to be part of the group.
Exactly, unacknowledged. Do you want to comment on the fact that Hinako had to wear a bunny outfit this episode?
No, I don't really want to.
I just wanted to say that it
yeah,
happened. So if anyone listening is considering watching Long Riders, this is the kind of show where they dress the main characters up in bunny outfits for no reason, because that's the only way they're gonna sell any merch.
Well, also the fact it's like I kind of love the justification for this is that her parents are paying her double to wear the bunny outfit.
It is a little funny, but also it's gross.
It's very gross of her parents.
Yeah.
I mean, I realize she's in college, so she's of age and everything, but it's very creepy that you're treating your daughter like that.
Yeah, I don't know. It didn't make me feel good. No, I mean,
Yeah,
nothing
no.
in this episode really did. It was either boring, poorly animated, or both at all times. The CG is really intrusive when they use it,
Oh,
because the
yeah.
models for Amy are so, like, her CG model is so it looks so out of place from
Yeah.
her 2D model, and so it just really sticks out like a sore thumb. This
Oh my god.
this show
When they-
is the low point of my week.
That's fair. That's fair. Okay, well, thank you for. I think that kind of wraps it up.
Yeah, right. Go out on a low note, right?
Yeah, right. Well, thank you as usual for joining me this week.
It was my pleasure, despite everything I said.
Well, Matt, would you hit the credits?
I surely shall.
Our logo design is by James Ratcliffe. The theme music is Fly High by Burnout Syndromes, covered and performed by Luke Bartka. You can follow Koshiencast on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and our email is koshiencast@gmail.com. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review. We will be back next week with the best and worst from the world of sports anime, and until then, keep training.